Austin. This is a Fox News alert. I'm Marianne Rafferty. Arizona Senator John McCain, we're just getting word, war hero John McCain has died. McCain's death coming shortly after it was revealed that he was no longer seeking treatment for his brain cancer. McCain diagnosed with brain cancer in July of last year. That tumor discovered during surgery to remove a blood clot. McCain, born August 29th, 1936 at the Coco Solo Naval Station in Panama. That's a U.S. territory, was a U.S. territory at the time. The son and grandson of four-star admirals. McCain graduated from the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1958, and then later flight school. That was in 1960. At the start of the Vietnam War, McCain volunteering for active combat duty. In 1967, during a bombing run, though, his plane was shot down. He was captured and held a prisoner of war until 1973. Now, for his service, McCain earned the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and also the Distinguished Flying Cross. After his release, he then later served as senator from the state of Arizona. McCain ran for president for the first time back in 2000, but lost a heated primary season to former President George W. Bush. He eventually secured the nomination back in 2008, but lost the general election to former President Barack Obama. Again, if you're just joining us, Senator John McCain, dead at the age of 81. Here's a look back at his life.
John Sidney McCain III was born in 1936 at a naval air station in the Panama Canal Zone. McCain's father and grandfather were both four-star admirals. The family moved often between bases on the mainland and abroad. It was inevitable he would pursue a Navy career, and Ensign McCain graduated from the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1958. As war broke out in Vietnam, McCain volunteered for duty. He flew attack planes against the North Vietnamese and escaped serious injury in June 1967 when a rocket aboard the aircraft carrier USS Forrestal accidentally struck McCain's plane. Explosions and fires killed 134 people.
I felt this tremendous blow to my airplane and saw the fire coming out, so I probably had reacted a little more quickly than those in the planes near me. Some of those in the planes near me didn't survive.
On his 23rd air mission on October 26, 1967, his plane was shot down, this time during a bombing mission over Hanoi. The North Vietnamese captured him and moved him to the infamous Hanoi Hilton prison.
He was terribly injured, fractured arms, broken knee, left arm was out of the socket. He had not been fed, and basically he was starving to death.
McCain's captors offered him early release because he was an admiral's son, but he refused. He endured torture and more than 3 years in solitary confinement. He said Air Force Colonel Day saved his life.
Bud Day was the most steadfast, the most inspirational, and the toughest of anybody that I must have something to do with his Iowa upbringing.
McCain was released in 1973 and awarded Silver and Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and the Distinguished Flying Cross. His wounds left him with impaired physical abilities for the rest of his life. He retired from the Navy as a captain in 1981 after marrying Cindy Hensley, a teacher from Arizona. He moved to Phoenix and got into politics, serving 2 terms in the House of Representatives. He was elected to the Senate in 1986, where he developed a reputation as a maverick. While he voted with his party most of the time, it became clear he was willing to buck Republican leadership and occasionally align with Democrats. McCain's political career hit a bump in 1989 when he and 4 other senators, the Keating Five, were implicated in a savings and loan scandal and accused of corruption. A Senate Ethics Committee investigation found that though McCain used poor judgment, he was not guilty of any wrongdoing. McCain said that experience inspired him to co-author the McCain-Feingold bill on campaign finance reform with Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold, which finally passed in 2001. And as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, he took on the tobacco industry with legislation to increase cigarette taxes. McCain published a memoir, Faith of My Fathers, in 1999. It became a bestseller and later a film. In the meantime, he announced his candidacy for president, appealing to independents and traveling aboard the Straight Talk Express. But after defeat in South Carolina, Texas Governor George W. Bush gained momentum, and McCain went on to lose 9 of 13 primaries on Super Tuesday. He withdrew from the race in March 2000, returning to the Senate. The senator threw his support behind President Bush and the Iraq War, but he later criticized the Bush administration for not sending enough troops to Iraq. He became the first Republican senator to demand Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld's resignation.
We're in one heck of a mess in Iraq, and the American people told us loud and clear last week that they're not happy. They're not happy with the course of this war. Neither am I.
He also continued to partner with his colleagues on the other side of the aisle. McCain and Democratic Senator Ted Kennedy made a push for comprehensive immigration reform, though the legislation failed to pass both houses. With President Bush's second term coming to a close, McCain again announced his candidacy for president.
I do so grateful for the privilege this country has already given me, mindful that I must seek this responsibilities for reasons greater than my self-interest.
This time, McCain won the majority of delegates on Super Tuesday, and then in the March 4th primaries, giving him the lead he needed to secure the nomination. McCain's surprise vice presidential pick was Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. Together, the two surged ahead of Democratic candidate and Illinois Senator Barack Obama and VP candidate Joe Biden in the polls following the Republican National Convention. But Obama gained momentum and ultimately defeated McCain in the general election.
These are difficult times for our country, and I pledge to him tonight to do all in my power to help him lead us through the many challenges we face.
As ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, McCain remained active on foreign policy. He rallied for military intervention in Libya against Muammar Gaddafi, pushed for democratic reforms in Egypt, and called for withholding U.S. aid to the Egyptian army after it ousted President Mohamed Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood party. He also publicly criticized the Obama administration for its handling of the September 11, 2012 attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens.
Have no doubt, we are holding the President of the United States responsible, and he is responsible, and he has given contrasting versions of events to the American people.
In 2015, McCain became chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee and used the platform to push for an expanded U.S. military presence in Iraq and Syria and a new strategy in Afghanistan.
We need to have a strategy to win. The strongest nation on earth should be able to win.
As the 2016 presidential election candidates began to emerge and he campaigned for his own Senate re-election, McCain pledged to support the eventual Republican nominee. He later pulled his endorsement of Donald Trump, citing their differences on public policy issues like national security and Trump's controversial comments about women. Then, in the midst of his 6th Senate term, he underwent surgery to remove a blood clot above his left eye and was later diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumor. Despite a poor cancer prognosis, he remained a dominant voice in the Senate, at times going against his own party's efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. In July 2017, some senators audibly gasped as Arizona Senator gave a memorable thumbs-down gesture on the floor. McCain cast the deciding no vote, which killed the GOP's health care measure. All this as McCain released another memoir in his final days, The Restless Wave, a brutally honest assessment of his highs and lows, personal and professional. The Maverick senator offered this candid assessment, writing, "I'm not sure what to make of President Trump's convictions. His reaction to unflattering news stories, calling them fake news, whether they're credible or not, is copied by autocrats who want to discredit and control a free press. Flattery secures his friendship, criticism his enmity." In an audiobook excerpt, the man who made public service his life's passion reflected on what he considered his unfinished legacy.
Maybe I'll be gone before you hear this. My predicament is, well, rather unpredictable. But I'm prepared for either contingency, or at least I'm getting prepared. I have some things I'd like to take care of first, some work that needs finishing, and some people I need to see. And I want to talk to my fellow Americans a little more, if I may.
John McCain is survived by his wife Cindy and 7 children. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
If you're just joining us, Senator John McCain dead at the age of 81. We're going to pause now for just a moment and allow our Fox affiliates around the country to join us. If you're just joining us, this is a Fox News alert. Arizona Senator and war hero John McCain has died. McCain's death coming shortly after it was revealed that he was no longer going to seek any treatment for brain cancer that he was diagnosed with in July of last year. The tumor discovered during surgery to remove a blood clot. McCain was born August 29, 1936 at the Coco Solo Naval Station in Panama. That was a U.S. territory at the time. The son and grandson of four-star admirals. McCain graduated from the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1958, later attending flight school and graduating in 1960. At the start of the Vietnam War, McCain volunteered for combat duty, and then in 1967, during a bombing run, his plane was shot down and he was captured and held as a prisoner of war until 1973. Now, for his service, McCain earned the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and also the Distinguished Flying Cross. After his release from being a prisoner of war, he served as a Republican congressman, then also later as a senator from the state of Arizona. McCain also ran for president for the first time in 2000, but lost a heated primary season to former President George W. Bush. But he eventually secured the nomination in 2008, but then lost the general election to former President Barack Obama. Let's go ahead and go now to Fox News anchor Bret Baier, who is joining us now live from Washington, D.C. Bret, what can you tell us? This was expected. We'd heard a statement from the family, but now, as we just said, John McCain dead at the age of 81.
Yeah, Marianne, it's a sad day because there are not many John McCains out there in the world, and he was unique on Capitol Hill. His ability to stand up to not only his party, but his ability to reach across the aisle and have relationships and get things done in an environment in Washington that is obviously increasingly partisan. John McCain was a unique figure. He always was, not only from the time that he served in Vietnam and spent that time in the Hanoi Hilton as a prisoner of war, but also as a senator, where he fought vigorously for the U.S. military. He fought vigorously for counterterrorism efforts against al-Qaeda and terrorists around the world, and also fought for regular order in the United States Senate. He is one of these figures that is kind of a lion of the Senate. If you think of the Senate, Ted Kennedy, Orrin Hatch, John McCain is a big name when it comes to the U.S. Senate. And it's a sad day. The 2008 presidential nominee, obviously taking a lot of controversy, and some conservatives really had a problem with his vote on Obamacare late in the night on the Senate floor with the thumbs down on repealing and replacing Obamacare, but gave one of his most impassioned speeches saying that regular order had to happen and that it wasn't about stuffing legislation down lawmakers' throats. He was somebody who stood up to power, and he was a unique figure in American history. And I think you can't really put your finger on many people who have served as much or the kind of service that John McCain has served the United States.
And, you know, Bret, even though you didn't hear from him as much, you know, in the last years he was fighting cancer, he was still very much involved in a lot of the major votes that were going on Capitol Hill.
He was, and, you know, considered coming back for several of them. You know, the defense bill that passed was named for John McCain, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. You know, I covered the Pentagon for 6.5 years, and there would be, you know, different branches of the military who would have to testify in front of the Armed Services Committee, and specifically John McCain, and they would shudder because he would really get after them about, you know, pricing and what exactly they were doing for the betterment of the U.S. military. He was a big, big figure on Capitol Hill, And tonight, I think there are people on both sides of the aisle, an outpouring of support and statements supporting the family and offering prayers.
All right, Bret, we're going to come back to you in just a moment, but our coverage will continue now on Fox News Channel on cable and satellite, so stay with us for much more on this. Again, if you're just now joining us, John McCain dead at the age of 81. All right, Bret, we are back with you now. And, we have been discussing the distinguished career and life of John McCain. You were talking about the fact that, he had a reputation for sometimes going against, his own party, against the Republican Party, earning that nickname, the Maverick. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, and I think he relished it, actually. I mean, he kind of liked doing it because he wasn't a traditional figure. He ran in some races in Arizona as a staunch conservative, and obviously had very conservative views, but also reached across the aisle and tried to make deals and tried to make different things happen that perhaps were not where the Republican Party was at one moment. In the year 2000, when he ran for president against George W. Bush, he rode the Straight Talk Express, his bus with reporters, and he was really catching fire there for some time and kind of fell short in South Carolina, but then got the nomination in 2008. Lindsey Graham just tweeting out his good friend
All right. I think we just lost Bret Baier. We're going to try to get back to him for more on this in just a few moments. But if you're just joining us, John McCain has died at the age of 81. He was an Arizona senator and also a war hero. His death coming shortly after it was revealed that he was no longer going to seek treatment for his brain cancer, a glioblastoma, a type of brain tumor, brain cancer. McCain was diagnosed with brain cancer back in July of last year, but the tumor was discovered during surgery to remove a blood clot. McCain was born back in August of 1936 at the Coco Solo Naval Station in Panama, which was a U.S. territory at the time. He is the son and grandson of 4-star admirals, so the military ran in his family. McCain graduating from the Naval Academy in Annapolis in 1958. He then later went to flight school, graduating in 1960. Then at the beginning of the Vietnam War, McCain volunteered for combat duty. In 1967, during a bombing run, his plane was shot down and he was captured and held as a prisoner of war until 1973. For his service, he earned several top military honors, the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart. We've got Bret Baier now back with us. Bret, we want to talk a little bit more about John McCain and his distinguished career, not just in the military, but serving the people of the United States as both a congressman and a senator from the state of Arizona. We were just talking about how he sometimes went against what was popular in his own party and voted his conscience. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, sure. I was in the middle of giving you Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina.
Yes.
His good friend just tweeted out, America and freedom have lost one of her greatest champions, and I've lost one of my dearest friends and mentor. I will need some time to absorb this, but I want Cindy and the entire McCain family to know they're in my prayers. Remember that when John McCain ran for president, Lindsey Graham and Senator Joe Lieberman, independent from Connecticut, Democrat who caucused with the independent, then won as an independent. They were the three amigos campaigning, and in part campaigning on reaching across the aisle. Lieberman often talked about how John McCain was a driving force, especially when it came to U.S. foreign policy and military policy. And obviously the party, the Republican Party, believed that he would be a strong candidate in 2008, and obviously fell to Barack Obama in that election in 2008. Since then, he has been a force. He has always been a force on Capitol Hill. and continued to be really up to his last days.
You know, you talk about him being a force. You know, you often hear people talk about the fact that, you know, he voted his conscience, always voted his conscience, and voted against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which we had discussed earlier. Tell us more about that and how that, you know, affected how he was viewed on Capitol Hill.
Well, I think on Capitol Hill was one thing, and the White House was another. I don't see a statement yet from President Trump, but Melania Trump has just tweeted out, "Our thoughts, prayers, and deepest sympathy to the McCain family. Thank you, Senator McCain, for your service to the nation." President Obama has just put a statement out saying, "John McCain and I were members of different generations, came from completely different backgrounds, and competed at the highest level of politics. But we shared, for all our differences, a fidelity to something higher, the ideals for which generations of Americans and immigrants alike have fought, marched, and sacrificed." He goes on to say, "Our heartfelt condolences to Cindy and the family from Michelle and Barack Obama." Obviously, the healthcare vote sticks in the craw of President Trump. He believed he had everything lined up, and John McCain made a stand there. And had it not been for John McCain's vote, that would have moved forward. And we don't know what that would have led to legislatively. But he was someone who would do that and kind of relish that role to stand on principle. And he made his case on the Senate floor, the last speech that he gave, saying that the country should get together and solve things that we agree on first, argue about things that we don't agree on, but fight about it in a process and a civil way on the Senate floor.
And, you know, that's what we heard a lot. Again, him, you know, never really just following. He always, you know, went in his own direction, earning that nickname, the Maverick. And, you know, making that case on the Senate floor, you know, that we should all come together. We should figure out a way to agree, especially when it comes to passing laws. Can you talk a little bit more about that with us, about the fact that, again, in the last year, even when he was fighting cancer, you would still hear from him. He still seemed to be very much involved in what was going on.
Listen, I had the honor of covering him in 2000. I covered the 2008 presidential race. I covered him ever since on Capitol Hill. I tweeted this out. I said he was an American hero. He was a maverick in the way that he dealt with votes, that he stood up to his party, that he acted in Congress. And he was someone who could move the ball on both sides of the aisle. There are a lot of people on Capitol Hill who believe that there should be more John McCains who can be able to do that in our current environment. And on this day, as we say goodbye to this American hero, I think there are a lot of people in the Senate who have worked with him for years who long for people like him.
Bret, yeah, you said it very well. An American hero indeed, a distinguished career as a Navy pilot. Bret, we're going to get back to you in just a few moments, but for anyone who's just now joining us, we want to let you know John McCain, Senator John McCain, dead at the age of 81 after a long career serving the people of the United States, first as a Navy pilot and then as a senator, congressman and senator from the state of Arizona. He served us at 4 decades. He retired back in 1981 after a distinguished career in the military as a Navy fighter pilot. He was taken prisoner and was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. He had a reputation for sometimes going against his own party and often voting his conscience, earning him the nickname Maverick. And now joining me on the phone is Chad Pergram. He's our senior Capitol Hill producer. Chad, what can you tell us right now? You know, you're on Capitol Hill every day, and you've seen John McCain in action. What does all of this mean to you?
Well, this is a moment that people thought for a long time was inevitable. They talked about this in hushed tones, but when you talked about what might be next for John McCain or if he was coming back or what the circumstances might be, people just did not want to talk about it. I should note the last time he voted in the Senate was on, but, you know, as Bret kind of indicated, you know, and as you indicated, we continued to hear from him. His presence was very obvious on Capitol Hill, even though he was far, far away and was convalescing from the, cancer. We would see these statements from him on a regular basis, policy statements, not things issued by his spokespersons, but from John McCain weighing in on major pieces of legislation. There was a statement on the John McCain defense bill, which was signed into law just a couple of weeks ago in upstate New York. There was a statement on a tribal water issue in Arizona. So he was very involved. And that's why when we saw the statement from the family yesterday morning, we all thought that, that was a signal. This was not from John McCain. And even though John McCain was not there, he made his position known on Gina Haspel, for instance, the CIA director. He was very concerned about her record on enhanced interrogation techniques, or torture, as some might call it. And he's expressed that he thought she should be rejected. And he indicated in his statement back in May that he wouldn't be able to vote, but he thought that his colleagues should, follow his lead. And I remember talking to Jeff Flake, the Republican senator from Arizona, who said, that carries a lot of weight. And Dianne Feinstein from California said sort of the same thing. Now, they went ahead and confirmed Gina Haspel as the CIA director, but people were looking for these messages from John McCain from Arizona to weigh in. Even on Bret Kavanaugh, and that was very telling. He didn't say how he would, consider Bret Kavanaugh. He didn't say he was going to meet with Bret Kavanaugh because he hasn't been here. But he said, I hope the Senate, considers him and in due course and does a thorough review and vetting of Bret Kavanaugh. And that kind of indicated back in July when Kavanaugh was nominated that we didn't think we would see John McCain come back to vote.
And we've talked often about the fact that he did have conservative views, but that he also reached across the aisle many times. Can you talk to us again about the significance of that?
One of the most significant pieces of legislation that has John McCain's name on it is the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law. Now, to be clear, the one that was ultimately signed into law was not the McCain-Feingold version. It was a House version by Chris Shays and Marty Meehan from Massachusetts. But basically, when you see those television ads and they say, I'm so-and-so and I approve this message, that all came from that piece of legislation. And again, working with a pretty liberal Democratic senator, Russ Feingold from Wisconsin. That was very reflective of John McCain. I remember there was an energy bill that was up in the Senate in 2004, and he was absolutely appalled at how many lobbyists. He said to me in the hallway, he said, I don't think I've ever seen so many lobbyists in the Capitol. That sort of influence concerned him greatly. And that this was a byproduct of something that happened to John McCain. He was part of the Keating Five. These were 5 senators who got in trouble for, some indiscretions with the savings and loan crisis back in 1989, taking trips and so on and so forth. The Ethics Committee came down pretty hard on some of the other senators, Alan Cranston from California, John Glenn from Ohio, but they basically, hit John McCain the least, and he survived. That kind of changed John McCain, and the reason that you saw things like the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law, because he evolved in that sense. I got a message this morning from Mike DeWine, the former Republican senator from Ohio, former House member, and he told me something I didn't know about John McCain. Mike DeWine is running for governor in Ohio right now, and he said, we came in as freshmen in 1982 into the House of Representatives. He served for 4 years in the House before moving to the Senate, being elected in 1986. And he said, John McCain was our class president. He said he was a leader even then. And I did not know that in 1982, when John McCain became a freshman in the House, that he was the class president.
Chad, always a leader, according to everyone, and against always reaching across the aisle to try to come to agreements and make things better. Chad, we're going to come back to you later. Right now, we are going to take it over to Fox News Channel correspondent Alicia Acuna, who is joining us live now from Phoenix, Arizona. And Alicia, what is the mood there?
Hi, Marianne. Well, as you know, this was expected at some point, but it's still incredibly difficult for the people of Arizona who he represented in the U.S. Senate and on Capitol Hill since 1982, and we are hearing from his wife of 38 years, Cindy McCain, on Twitter. She writing, "My heart is broken. I am so lucky to have lived the adventure of loving this incredible man for 38 years. He passed the way he lived, on his own terms, surrounded by the people he loved, in the place he loved best." What she's referring to is the family ranch, about 90 minutes north of here in Cornville, Arizona. It's just about south of Sedona, Arizona. They have this vast family ranch, one of his favorite places on earth, as she mentioned, and he has been there since December. He made his last vote in the U.S. Senate on December 7th, and then returned to Arizona, had spent some time with doctors and in hospitals, but ultimately departed this earth at his favorite place there in northern Arizona. He has been receiving family and friends. Visitors have been going in and out of the ranch area here this week. Also, we heard from Meghan McCain, his daughter. She on Twitter also issued a statement, posting it by first saying, "I love you forever, my beloved father," and then explaining that she was by his side as he left this earth, just like he was by her side on the day that she was born, and that she says that he taught her what it meant to be a man, and he will be forever missed. So, Marianne, right now, a tremendous amount of sadness. There will be plans to be made to honor this man, this hero, this American hero here. At this point, the family is simply in mourning. Marianne.